To unpack this a little bit further is SABC political editor Abbey Makoe, who joins us now. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
I know you've been working throughout the festive season as well. Such is the life of a journalist.
True, yeah.
20 years of democracy. This is going to be a big story.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that because first and foremost, 20 years is a significant milestone in the development of a very nascent democracy such as ours. But also we're talking about 20 years where, for an example, the born frees will be voting for the very, very first time. But also as we mark 20 years of our democracy, we do so for the first time, very first time, without the founding father of our democracy, Nelson Mandela. And that, for me, is a combination of factors which really makes this a very, very important 20 years of our democracy.
I couldn't agree with you more. As well, this year marking those much anticipated elections, and they are going to be interesting, to say the least.
Well, absolutely. They are going to be very interesting, particularly because we've got new entrants. We're going to have new players in the election playing field. We have your Ahang, we have your EFF. We have the ruling party under enormous challenges, and it remains to be seen at the end of the elections how each and every of the participants in the polls has fared.
Now, under the umbrella of 20 years of democracy will stem subcategories of different topics that we'll be looking into, perhaps poverty alleviation, houses being built, etc. What do you foresee as the stories that will come under that umbrella of 20 years of democracy?
I think one of the themes that will be cutting across will be poverty or poverty alleviation. The land question will come again. Because you know that the ruling party, since January 8th, at the beginning of this year, they made land one of the key questions to deal with. And we saw the 100 years anniversary of the 1913 Land Act last year being given a kind of an attention never given before. So you are looking at those kind of issues as the ones that will be cutting across. But of course, above all, we are going to see parties fighting over who can actually provide the best administration for South Africa. And ANC will be saying, look at our track record. And those who are, who want to be where the ruling party is will be saying, well, we can do better. Yeah. And this is, a lot of theories will come about.
And that track record will be up for scrutiny this year as well. You did mention that ours is a relatively young democracy. 20 years in the greater scheme of things is very little, considering that colonial powers ruled for a good 300 years, if you include apartheid as well. So in these 20 years, people will be breaking apart all the achievements of the ANC and testing them whether or not they've fulfilled the promises that were made in '94.
Not only that, but also they'll be contrasting that with any possible alternative. Yeah. And they'll be making a determination as to whether, if they withdraw their backing of what they have backed throughout 20 years, is worth it or not. So it's going to be an interesting election marking 20 years of our democracy.
What about comparing South Africa with the rest of the continent? Because many people will look at us and say, although there are a lot of issues that have come to the fore, we are the darlings of Africa when it comes to our democracy. Will that play a part, do you think, as we scrutinize the 20 years of democracy?
One of the greatest benefits that South Africa has had throughout history has been the fact that we were almost the last country in the continent to be liberated. And therefore we had the privilege of learning from the previous mistakes of those who became liberated before us. So we're able to learn the best and the worst out of them, and in that regard we've been extremely fortunate as a country to be among those which was able to learn from the ones who came before us.
And the naysayers who say that we're headed on a downward spiral, do you think that our young democracy can sustain us on this path of equality, if we can say that? Do you think we can sustain this momentum that we've begun in democracy?
I believe that the ruling party by far still enjoy the majority of support among the citizens of this country, but I also look at the opposite side of the ruling party, and I see parties which also would like to build on the founding ethos of what Nelson Mandela and the ANC did, which is to find a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South African order. And I don't think the naysayers have got a leg to stand on.
We know that coming up to the elections, again, I'm going back to that, everything that any party does will be seen as electioneering, whether it's the providing of essential services or whatever it is that comes up will be seen as electioneering in full swing. What I want to know from you is, are we going to see perhaps dirty politics this year? Are we going to see the gloves taken off between the various parties, or are we going to be, polite as South Africans on the road to the elections?
I think we are going to move from polite to semi-polite. I don't think we will degenerate into the dirty side of doing things. South Africans, by and large, are quite culturally orientated. And so I don't think anyone who wants to engage in some kind of dirty politicking will attract a lot of sympathy or support. And people know that. I think we are going to continue to see people being civil with each other, looking at more issues than dealing with the players. So they're not going to use that cliche, they're going to play ball and not the men.
Yeah, I think we are very conservative as South Africans. We do play by the rules somewhat.
Absolutely, and there are plenty of examples to show that when someone veers off the realms of what is considered to be acceptable decorum in our political space, we know what happens. The support immediately is withdrawn.
When it comes to the 20 years of democracy, that mark, and the elections, which key topics do you think will come up in terms of services? Do you think it will be education? Do you think it will be jobs? Because jobs are a major factor. Do you think it will perhaps be the provision of houses? Which do you think will stand up, and not only in terms of electioneering promises, but also in terms of key focuses for this year?
And I think the bread and butter issues for me will be, are people able to go to their bed at night on an empty stomach or with something inside their stomach? I think those are what ordinary South Africans worry about. Issues such as the unemployment rate, issues such as job creation, the future of the youth in South Africa. We are going to see infrastructural development, issues such as the potholes. All these issues that to the naked eye can be seen on a daily basis are what concerns ordinary and extraordinary South Africans. And these are going to be undoubtedly, in my mind, issues that are really grappled upon throughout the electioneering period.
And also the passing of Utatu Nelson Mandela also, I think, is going to weigh heavily on the hearts of many South Africans as we just take a look at what he stood for, and as we as individuals aspire to live up to those values.
I believe that the ruling party will want to point out the fact that Utata was the product of the African National Congress. And they will want to remind South Africans and voters and the world that Nelson Mandela was the ANC itself, and that what he stood for is a reflection of what the ANC still stands for today. They'll want that message to be taken home in no uncertain terms. And I believe that the Nelson Mandela factor will become real when elections get into full swing. But otherwise, overall, you're quite right. This is going to be a very, very interesting 20 years marking our democracy. So,
there's a saying that says no race for the wicked. I think we should change it to no race for the journalist. In 2014, there's no doubt that we will be working in full swing throughout.
One of the biggest stories of the year right now is January 8th, your annual ANC. And of course, this one is more significant in that the ANC will also be launching the election manifesto. So that's going to be on the 11th, the Saturday after the 8th next week. So we're going to be looking at what the ANC believes is their future, is their kind of a dream of South Africa beyond the 20 years of democracy. So it's definitely going to be an interesting year. The other story away from politics, of course, the South Africans will have to take note of where the international media will come again here, will be the Pistorius story, by the way.
Indeed, and that is also something that does cast a shadow, at least on our country. It's going to be a big one as well, where the world converges. He was the darling, the sweetheart of South Africa, and although it's not politically inclined, it is something that kind of will either make or break brand South Africa.
Look, South Africa is one of the greatest countries on earth, one of the biggest nations on earth. And the reason why we attract so much attention globally is because we are the special kind. And I think we have to take note of the fact that in us is a sum total of greatness.
I think that's a perfect place to leave it there. So there's more positive than negative that's actually happening in the country, and it's definitely one to look out for.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us and for letting us pick your brain. That's my colleague there, political editor, joining us to discuss all things South African. We focused a lot on the politics because it is a big political year, 20 years of our democracy, and of course the 2014 elections coming up. Thank you so much, Abbey Makoe, joining us there to give us some of the insights and a bit of a glimpse as to what you can expect here on SABC News in terms of the politics. With that, let's take a look at the